The sun shone warmly over a small village in Izmir, Turkey. Mud brick houses stood close together, and narrow paths wove between them. Children ran through the streets, laughing and kicking up tiny clouds of dust. The smell of fresh bread and spices filled the air as shopkeepers called out to customers. A group of 7 friends sat under a big tree, sharing a meal. One grabbed the biggest piece of bread. "Hey, you always do that," another laughed. "That's because I'm the fastest." Their dog wagged its tail, hoping for crumbs. But not everything in the village was happy. The king was cruel and wanted everyone to follow his commands. His soldiers marched through the streets in heavy armor, holding sharp swords. People quickly stepped aside, lowering their heads in fear. One afternoon, the king's chief guard stood in the village square and shouted, "Listen, everyone! The great king commands that all must bow to false gods and not to Allah. Anyone who refuses will be punished." The villagers lowered their heads in fear. Later that day, the 7 friends sat under a fig tree, no longer laughing. They were worried. "We can't live like this," one of them whispered. Another, who always made jokes, sighed. "And what do we do? Argue in the streets? The soldiers will throw us in jail before dinner." They sighed and went home, feeling hopeless. The next morning, the friends met again near a water well, this time serious and determined. "We can't bow to false gods," the tallest one said, "but we can't fight the king either. We must take refuge in the mountains and ask Allah for guidance." The others thought for a moment, then nodded. It was their only choice. Later that night, the 7 friends gathered again under a lantern-lit gazebo far from the town center. The tallest one extended his hand, palm up, and said, "So, will you come with me, brothers?" One by one, they placed their hands over his, a silent pact forming between them. "All right, but what do we take? Food, maybe?" said the youngest one. "Of course, and water, lots of water," one of them chimed in. Yes, we all know you get thirsty every 5 minutes." They chuckled, the tension easing just a little. At midnight, the 7 friends and their loyal dog quietly walked through the village, their cloaks wrapped tightly around them. They carried only small bags with bread and water. Their dog trotted beside them, tail down, as if he knew how important their journey was. They walked far, climbing hills and crossing rocky paths. The moonlight stretched their shadows. Their feet hurt and their stomachs grumbled, but they kept moving. Stopping wasn't an option. As they grew tired, the dog ran ahead, barking and tossing pebbles in the air. He rolled onto his back, wagging his tail. "He's telling us to enjoy the journey," one of them laughed. Their spirits lifted and they kept walking. At sunrise, they found a hidden cave between 2 big rocks. Vines covered the entrance like a secret door. They felt safe as they stepped inside. "Now what?" one of them asked. "Let's rest, then pray to Allah for help," the tallest one said. "I feel like a bear," another chuckled. "At least bears don't snore." They laughed softly. The dog curled up beside them, keeping them warm. One by one, they closed their eyes and fell asleep. For the first time in a long while, they felt at peace. Days passed, then weeks, then years. The world outside kept changing, but inside the cave, they slept deeply. Outside, everything changed. Villages grew into big cities, new kings ruled and old ones disappeared. The world was no longer the same. Then, one day, as the sun shone through the cave's entrance, the young men finally woke up. They stretched and yawned, then stepped outside and froze. The dusty roads were now smooth stone paths. Their village was gone. Instead, tall buildings and noisy streets surrounded them. They looked at each other with worried faces. "Where is everyone?" one of them whispered. "This isn't our village." Fear crept into their hearts. Had the king found them? Was this a trick? They huddled together, scanning the streets for soldiers, but their stomachs had other worries. The smell of warm bread and roasted meat made their mouths water. "Let's go to the market," one of them suggested. "We need food." They hesitated, but knew they had no choice. They entered the bustling market, staring at strange clothes and carts. At a stall filled with golden bread, one of them placed a coin on the counter. "Bread, please." The shopkeeper turned the coin over, frowning. "Where did you get this?" His voice was sharp. The friends glanced at each other. "It's our money," one whispered. The shopkeeper squinted at them, then back at the coin. "This coin is ancient." His voice got louder, and people gathered around, whispering. "Who are they?" someone asked. "Where did they come from?" The young men's hearts pounded. Had they made a mistake? Would they be in trouble? They stepped back, ready to run. The shopkeeper saw their fear and smiled kindly. "Wait," he said gently. "Don't be afraid. Come with me. There's someone you should meet." Inside a grand hall in the city, the shopkeeper led them to an old, wise man. He had a long white beard and kind eyes. "Your story has been told for generations," he said softly. "People never forgot you." The young men sat in silence, their eyes wide. Everything they had left behind, their faith, their bravery, had been remembered. Outside, people gathered, their faces bright with joy. They thanked Allah for keeping the young men safe. Families hugged, elders prayed, and lanterns lit up the streets. The city celebrated the miracle, a reminder of Allah's love and protection. The young men had seen Allah's mercy. Their hearts were full of thankfulness. They knew their faith had never been in vain. With peaceful smiles, they made a decision to return to their cave, their safe home. The walk back felt easy, their hearts light. As they stepped inside, they knew they belonged there. They whispered one last prayer, thanking Allah for His guidance. They had learned that even in the hardest times, faith would always light the way. With smiles on their faces, they lay down and closed their eyes, falling into a peaceful sleep once again.